Hey family, it's Danielle, and today for this Monday's marriage chat, we are going to discuss how to handle or get along better or deal with in-laws or your significant other's family. So if you're interested in finding out some tips on how to have a better relationship with your significant other's family or parents, stick around for the video.
The snob life, the homeschooling life,
the boss life,
the non-traditional life,
the family life,
telling it how it is, life outside the box.
And if you don't know what that means,
it's the non-traditional mommy.
baby.
Before we jump into this week's Monday's marriage chat, if you're new here, hi, welcome. My name is Danielle and I am the non-traditional mommy. And on Mondays, we discuss marriage or relationships and all things around relationships. We do challenges and chats. So if you're interested in that, join my little family and hit the subscribe button. To the rest of my non-traditional family, you guys are the MVPs and I love you bunches. Mwah. Now, let's talk about some tips to handle dealing with your significant other's family. One of the biggest challenges with marriage or a committed relationship and things like that is dealing with the blending of the families. Rather it's the male's family or it's the female's family. There tends to sometimes be just that friction and that kind of incohesiveness of dealing with each other's families. Sometimes it's one set of parents, sometimes it's both set of parents, sometimes it's the mother, sometimes it's the father. It just kind of depends. Sometimes it's both. It just varies from person to person. And then of course you have those situations where there are no problems. So if you're one of those people, kudos to you. I wanted to discuss some ways that you can maybe try to prevent having friction with your in-laws, or if you are currently having friction with your in-laws, how you can get that relationship back on track and maybe kind of ease that tension and friction. These are in no particular order. You can do them however you like. You may not need to do all of them. You may need to do all of them. You may have to do them more than once and consistently and frequently. The first tip is release your expectations. So you guys, expectations, when I say expectations, I'm really talking about the dreams and the ideologies that we have when we are planning out our perfect spouse, our perfect marriage, our perfect life, the things that we tend to do. And so usually when you're thinking about, your perfect significant other, especially as women, we're also thinking about the perfect family situation, how we're going to all spend holidays together and how hopefully both set of parents will be like BFFs and everybody will just come to one person's house and we'll all celebrate together. Whatever your dreams and ideas were, those things turn into expectations, and you go into a relationship with these dreams and kind of sort of expecting it to be that way. So expecting this person to kind of fall in line with what your dream or goal or desire was. And then when it doesn't happen, there's this disappointment, sadness, which can turn into resentment, frustration, and a whole lot of other things. So the first tip is to let go of any expectations when it comes to your in-laws or your significant other's family. Kind of try to go into it as a blank slate, just not knowing, waiting to see what happens, waiting to see what unfolds, waiting to see, how is this going to play out? So not having any expectations at all. And sometimes when we do that, when we go into a situation with zero expectations, we leave or we find ourselves kind of feeling better, like, oh wow, this turned out a whole lot better than what I was expecting, because you weren't expecting anything, so to speak. However, if you've already kind of had those expectations and along the way things have not went the way that you have thought they would go, or hoped they would go, wish they would go, and now you find yourself on this brink or in this place of tension and resentment, the goal would be to let go of your expectations now, to revamp those expectations. I talked about in a past video with healing with your parents on trying to make a cat bark. It's the same kind of situation here. If you've already had these expectations, say holidays, and you realize that it's just not going to be that, being able to let go of that expectation, maybe come up with a better solution for all parties involved. And so just letting go of expectations, releasing those, and facing what you have in front of you. Number 2 is going to be having understanding. So this can be hard at first, especially if you are a new couple, newlyweds, you're young, you don't have any children of your own. Sometimes having understanding is very difficult, especially if you come from a different set of parents or a different background. Trying to understand or place yourself in somebody else's shoes can sometimes be difficult. But what I'm talking about here is trying to put yourself in that person's shoes. So, for example, if your wife's father is feeling resentment towards you for whatever reason, justified, unjustified, whatever the case may be, having a sense of understanding that at one point maybe his daughter would use him and call him if she had a flat tire or had a question about repairs or anything like that. She would go to her father. Well, now she's turning to you and she's going to you, which is justifiably right. However, he's feeling a sense of loss with that relationship and that connection and that purpose or that need that he had with his daughter. And so being able to have some understanding of like, okay, I get it. If I had a daughter and all of a sudden she's now gone and dependent on somebody else where she once depended on me, there would be that sense of grief there and that sense of loss. And like I said, that typically will come when you start having children of your own and you start feeling what parents feel like, okay, I get this, I understand this, or whatever. So just being able to have a sense of understanding and being able to place yourself in the person's shoes. You know, for me, when I was younger, I used to say, because in my family, the tradition is the grandmother names the firstborn grandchild. And so, and that's been that way for the longest. And let me say it's worked out that way because all the first grandkids have been girls until I had my first child. My first child was a boy. Go figures, you guys. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, how's that gonna look when he gets married and he has a wife? She's not gonna she may not want me to name her child. And so I remember feeling like when I get married, you know, I don't want my husband's parents to feel left out or mother to feel left out, because I knew how special the naming process was for my family and how much fun it was and how we collaborated and all of those things. So I kind of had that sense of understanding. But again, that came once I had my first child, and it just so happened to be a boy. I can't say if he was a girl, if I would have had that same thinking or mind frame, because I wouldn't have been in that position to think that. So if you can have just a sense of understanding and being able to put yourself in the other person's shoes, sometimes it relaxes you as the person, and you're able to go into the relationship with them better. So even if the father-in-law is combative or dismissive or rude, which all of those things I'm not justifying or saying is right, and we'll get there. But because you are now in a place of understanding, you don't take those things as a personal attack on you, or feel like it's something that they're doing strictly to you. You don't feel that way because you know that there's an underlying feeling there. There's some underlying loss and grief and sadness. Number 3 is going to be communication. Now, communication comes in 2 forms. The first type of communication is being able to communicate with your significant other, because keep in mind, this is their family. So you want to be able to communicate with them and be able to have honesty is going to be key here. Being able to have an honest and open communication with them, being able to say, hey, I didn't like that, or I felt that was rude, or that made me feel sad, or I felt attacked, or whatever it is that is going on. And then your significant other being able to relate that information back to their family. You know, hey, she didn't appreciate that, or he didn't appreciate that, or we don't like that. We need you to do this or that. That's the first step of communication. The even better form of communication is if you can communicate that to the in-laws, to the family, and being able to say, hey, I didn't appreciate when you said that to me. It made me feel this, or whatever the case may be. Or, I would really appreciate it if you would call before you just show up. Things like that. Being able to communicate very clearly, openly, and honestly about what you need, what your feelings are, and how you would like to see the relationship operate moving forward, or whatever the case may be. So having that line of communication and you feeling confident enough to be able to say the things that you need to say. And again, a lot of people think when it comes to communicating, a lot of people think when you're expressing your feelings, your dislikes, your boundaries, that it's rude or it's disrespectful. But you can have an open and honest communication with your significant other's family and be direct and firm and clear and not be disrespectful or rude or any of those things. You're just making it very clear what your boundaries are, what your feelings are, what your needs are, and things like that. And that is okay, you guys. That's okay. And again, it's very important if your significant other is supportive and has your back and you guys are on one accord. So you guys also have had that communication and that understanding, and you guys are a cohesive front. So communication is going to be very important, and it has to remain consistent throughout the duration of the relationship, which ultimately is forever, right? It can't be like a sometime and one day you're enforcing a boundary and the next day you're not enforcing that boundary. It has to be very consistent type of communication. Number 4 is going to be compromise. So this is the hard one, you guys, but I feel like it can be easy. If you have a sense of understanding, if you have communicated with your significant other if you have released your expectations and these type of things, sometimes compromising can become a little bit easier for you. And so by compromise, I'm not saying compromise your boundaries or things like that, or things you're uncomfortable with, but come into a form of compromise that is okay for everybody. So for example, holidays. You may say, okay, I'm going to compromise and we'll spend Thanksgiving with your family, Christmas with mine this year, and then next year we'll switch Thanksgiving with mine, Christmas with yours. Or the compromise is I'm going to open up my house and everybody's going to come to my house, which means that I have the burden of entertaining both sides of the family. So having some form of compromise to help kind of aid that relationship along. Going back to the father-in-law with the tires or the repairs, your compromise may be, hey, I don't mind if you call your dad, or maybe I'll call your dad and bounce this repair off of him. Or maybe I'll call your dad and say, hey, we have a busted pipe. Do you mind coming to help me with that, or whatever? And so kind of compromising, even though you could call a repairman or you could do it yourself or whatever, that compromise of including him or making him feel that need again, and that you haven't necessarily lost your daughter and her desire to depend on her dad. That's still there. And so being able to compromise, just coming up with little tiny compromises like that can help aid in the relationship. Also with compromise, before you even get to a place of setting up some compromises, you've had that communication with your significant other on how their family works and how your family works and what things looked like for your family. So you have a sense of this is what we're going into, and your significant other can maybe even help assist with what compromises and what things will look like, because you guys have already communicated what your boundaries are and things like that. So again, that's where that communication with your significant other about their family becomes so critical and so important, because everybody grew up differently. I grew up not having chores. I think if you guys watched me and my husband's little Q&A, he said one of our challenges was parenting. And I know that was in direct relationship to the fact that we disagree strongly on chores. And it is because he grew up having to do chores and I grew up not having to do chores. And so, when we look at how we are as adults, I'm always comparing those two. But, he's very like, kids should have chores and things that they have to do. And I'm very like, you shouldn't have to force them to do anything. They should just want to do it. So, but that's a whole nother video, you guys. But sitting down and discussing just those very different thoughts and views, and then coming up with a compromise around it, things like that it kind of falls in the same line with your in-laws. Number 5, and the last and most important, if you don't take anything else away from this video, this is the most important one, and that is boundaries. Having very clear, concise boundaries and sticking to those boundaries. For you younger couples, I know that is hard. It's hard to feel like you can set boundaries with your significant other's parents, because it's their parents. And if you have this level of endearment and respect for your parents, you sometimes translate that over to other parents, and it becomes kind of hard and blurry on how do I set boundaries without feeling, rude or, once again, disrespectful and these kind of things. But you guys, I'm telling you, boundaries are so important. And it's even more important when you set those boundaries up front. The last thing you want to do is allow your boundaries to be crossed. Let's talk about showing up without calling. If you are in a relationship, you and your husband, you're married or you're committed, and your in-laws consistently show up at your house without calling, and you don't like it. You don't like it from that day one, but you smile and you're like, oh, hey, come in and can I get you something to drink? And they sit down and you're all like, but you're fuming on the inside. But you don't say anything. You don't say anything. And then they do it again. And then they do it again. And then they do it again. And it becomes this consistent thing till you finally reach your breaking point and you're like, hey, I don't like this. Now, when you go communication to your significant other and say, I really don't like when your parents just show up unannounced. They're going to say, since when? They've been doing this since the first day we got married. Well, I didn't like it then. Well, you didn't say anything then. And then it becomes this battle between you two, because even though for you at the very beginning, that was a clear boundary that was being crossed, you didn't communicate it. So setting those boundaries right then and there. So when they show up, and you feel it, you'll know when a boundary is crossed because you will feel it. And you feel it and you want to immediately say to you go to the significant other first, obviously, and say, hey, did you know your parents were coming? I don't like that they showed up unannounced. I would appreciate it if they give us a heads up next time before they show up unannounced. And so having that clear, honest communication. And it's even better if you can have that same type of communication with them. So, hey, I'm so happy. I'm so glad you guys stopped by. This is awesome. We're glad to see you guys. But moving forward, I would really appreciate if you guys could call and just let us know before you show up. So now you've set that boundary from the day one, from the jump. So the next time that boundary is crossed, you can reference the fact that you said that from day one. Now you're 5 years in this thing and you're like, Tanya, I messed up. I'm sorry, I didn't do that. But now 5 years later, I realize that's a boundary and I don't like it. Well, now you have to go back and start to set that boundary. And so, yes, you'll have that banter of, I know I didn't say anything 5 years ago, but this is a boundary for me. Or sometimes maybe 5 years ago, it didn't bother you. Maybe you didn't have kids or a sleeping baby or whatever your life has changed into 5 years later. So maybe it didn't bother you then, but it now bothers you. So, hey, this is now a boundary for me. And I know before I didn't say anything or it was okay, but now here we are and this is where I am. And I need you to respect that this is now a boundary for me. And holding your ground with that boundary. The thing about boundaries is there are no compromises for boundaries. When you have a boundary, usually there's not a lot of room to say compromise within a boundary, but there are ways to kind of make exceptions. There we go, to make exceptions to that without it feeling like you are crossing my boundary or crossing the line. So making sure that you have set these clear boundaries and then you are sticking to them, because if you are sometiming about your boundaries, then it's going to be very hard to take you seriously. And I personally feel that people appreciate boundaries. People appreciate structure. People appreciate knowing what makes you tick and what doesn't make you tick. There becomes that level of respect there's that word again, but there becomes that level of respect. And then that level of understanding comes along as well with the family of your significant other. And if it doesn't, you guys, if it never comes, if they never ever get it, or they never ever respect it, or they never ever understand it, but at least you feel good and you feel okay with your boundaries not being crossed. So that's number 5, and probably the most important. And I say, let me just say this, and I say the reason that one is so important is because you cannot have understanding. You cannot have effective communication. You definitely will not want to compromise. And it's going to be hard for you that you've let go of expectations if your boundaries are consistently being crossed, because that alone is going to make you feel frustrated and have resentment and anger. So if your boundaries are being crossed, these other 4, there's no way that these other 4 can ever come about with number 5 consistently being challenged and broken. So I hope that makes sense on why I say boundaries are the most important part. Once you've laid your boundaries out and it's been clear, and hopefully there is some respect for those boundaries, it then becomes easier to say, okay, let me let go of these expectations on what I thought it was going to be like. They're trying, let me let go. It becomes easier to communicate in the future because you've communicated once and it was well received. It becomes easier to have understanding and compassion and empathy for someone because you see that they are respectfully and trying to respect a boundary that you have in place. So it becomes a domino effect once your boundaries are set, made known, and then being respected. So there you go. Hopefully that all ties together. So basically, you guys, when you are marrying someone or in a committed relationship with someone, what you have to remember is it's not just that somebody. That somebody comes with these other somebodies. And while these other somebodies shouldn't be a part of your relationship, they do come along with them. And there is this level of having to have some form of relationship with these somebodies. So you don't just get to take the person and leave everybody else over to the side. It doesn't work that way. I'm sorry. I'm sorry if you were getting on this video in hopes that maybe there was some way that you could just have them and not everybody else. It doesn't work that way. So you're getting this person, and not only are you getting this person and these somebodies, but this person has luggage. I don't want to call it baggage. They have luggage with them. They have ways and personalities and DNA and certain qualities about them that stems from these somebodies and how they were raised. And so you still, even if somehow magically, miraculously, you were able to just take them, you're still having to inadvertently deal with the somebodies over here. So I think that is so important to remember and to keep in mind, is that when we take on a committed relationship, when we get married, we're marrying the person, but we're also in a way marrying everything else that kind of comes along with that person. Rather, it's in the form of a person, personality, DNA, etc., etc. So keep that in mind. And so you want to make sure that these somebodies are not affecting what you have right here, that you guys are intact and it's not affecting you guys. Because trust me, you'll have a whole lot of other stuff to deal with than to have to want to add that burden on top of all the other stuff that comes along with being in a committed relationship or marriage. So just keeping that in mind, keeping that on the forefront, and understanding that this is something you're going to have to walk your way through. And hopefully these 5 tips will help you do that and make it easier for you, or begin to set you on track to a better relationship with your significant other's family. So that's it, you guys. If you have any questions in regards to blending families or dealing with in-laws or family members, feel free to leave those below. If you've had issues in the past with your in-laws, how did you deal with it? How'd you guys get past it? What is your relationship like now? Leave those in the comments below for those couples that may be in the thick of it and are looking for some tips and ways. Let's keep the discussion going. And if you're still here, then you need to join our family. Can't y'all see we're great? We're great over here. Hit the subscribe button and join my little family. And if you're interested in more Monday marriage chats and challenges, I'll leave those videos for you guys here. And for the rest of my family, I will see you guys next Monday. Bye.